This is the Reflector Reflections podcast. My name is Annie. Join me as we journey around the world, talking with fellow reflectors as they experiment and navigate their unique design. Today's beautiful conversation is with Desiree Clemons. Desiree is a 5-1 reflector and the curator of the Inspired Human Design YouTube and website. She's also the leading lady for the Facebook group Inspiring Reflectors. Through her own spiritual and professional journey, Desiree provides videos and resources to help newcomers to human design discover what the teachings say about them. Welcome, Desiree.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you so much for having me. And just want to say, I think this is absolutely wonderful what you're doing. And, watching it from, when you first joined the group to, having this evolve to, something that is fantastic. And I truly appreciate it because it's so wonderful connecting with other reflectors and, bringing about more level of awareness, which, I'm all about. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for those kind words. It just made me realize it has been a very, when I first joined the group, I suppose I was one of those really lost, people. I was right there, and I guess how much it's been 8-10 months now since I joined that group as a newbie, and here we are. Here we are.
Right.
So I guess on that note, can we talk about you and your journey and how you got into human design, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, human design kind of like approached me. I was just laying in bed one night and I was watching Gaia. I don't know if you have that in
Yep.
Australia. You know what Gaia? Okay. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure a lot of reflectors know what Gaia is. And I was watching an interview with Richard Beaumont. He's a human design expert and he was talking about human design. And he said something about reflectors. And immediately in my mind, I was like, he said something like reflectors are weird. They're tied to the, not weird, they're unique. They're rare and they're tied to the moon. And I thought in my mind, I'm like, I have to be a reflector, right? Because it was just something that I was like, oh, this is me. He's talking about me. And and I went and I like plugged in all my birth details, and sure enough, it was like a reflector. And I was like, oh, okay, this is so, this is pretty awesome. And I think already at that time I was doing a lot of self-inquiry work anyway and learning a little bit more about like astrology. So, when I came across human design, it was so unique. What really drawed me to it was more of kind of like the I Ching and kind of like the gates, because I already knew somewhat about like Western astrology, a little bit about Vedic astrology, seeing the different, I guess, interpretations of like what this was actually saying about me. It was just like so eerily accurate that I was like, okay, well, now I'm hooked. And then I went further deeper into it, learning about strategy. And I like to consider myself a little bit more of like a left brain reflector. So when when I was listening to Rod talk about, the strategy and the authority and, waiting a lunar cycle, I really wanted to put that to the test because I was like, I'm kind of on the fence a little bit, for like, I was just having this conversation yesterday with another reflector in the chat. Like, we were believing human design and we're believing this story that this guy just like heard this voice. He got all this downloaded information. It stayed with him for 8 days. Like, it has a really unique origin story. And should I believe this? Like, how delusional was Raw? Is this accurate? Like, what is this? So I really put everything, and I still do like human design to the test. And like, I practiced my strategy and, just learn about, the different concepts and stuff like that. So I did that for about a year. And then I went back into, and I did like what, a lot of people do. I just typed in Google human design reflectors because I needed the information. I needed more, right? I went to Jovian Archive. I bought like, there's like 2 videos and like maybe like a lecture or something. Like, there wasn't that many resources. So I consumed those really fast. And then I got I went through like this really long report, which I shared in the reflectors video on my YouTube channel. But that was about a year later. I was like, I'm just going to make a video for reflectors because I know there's not a lot of resources. When I do a search, nothing's really coming up. And yeah, and what's so funny is for longest time, I'm like, this video is my worst video ever. Like, it was terrible. It was somewhat scripted, but a lot of it was just from the top of my head. And then it just really picked up. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting like other people that are, talking to me about reflectors. And then it's like, now I'm connecting with reflectors from all over the world. And I got to see, just like personal stories and like personal growth and really connect with people that, that are similar, like in the same position and stuff, because it can be life-changing information, if you take it serious and you learn about yourself with the context. So that's a little bit of like my origin story. It just, I was just laying in bed watching, TV, and yeah, it came across, and then I just kind of went further with it, and then I'm still doing it. So.
You are. And this was roughly what, about 5 years ago? Was that right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was about 5 years ago that I actually stumbled upon human design,
Mm.
and I was in a really rough spot, like personally. I was like staying with my mom, as and really trying to get back on my feet from a move. Like I moved out of state, and then I moved back home, and I was like pretty much starting from scratch. I lost a lot of my belongings and stuff like that. So it was a difficult time, and I was already like in this existential, just transitionary growth period, of in my life. And it was so synchronistic, and to have stumbled upon it.
It's
So
so good.
yeah, that was about 5 years ago. The video was about four, like 3 or 4, and then yeah, it took a minute before it picked up, because at like first I was just really just trying to connect with the reflectors and get as much information, and a lot of them were, like asking me for like more, and I'm like, well, I'm learning this with you guys as well. This wasn't something that I approached as like I'm an expert, because I don't consider myself as an expert in human design, but I am a student, and I do experiment with it, and I do, try my best to be like, that good role model. If I'm like talking about it and I'm telling people that, follow your strategy, just kind of test it and see what happens. I feel like, well, then I need to be doing that as well. So, it's definitely interesting, the group, and connecting with all the different reflectors, and the input of just of more like creation, more YouTube videos, and doing this and like podcasts is just, it's really great. It was something that I didn't see coming. It was something that I just never thought. I just started YouTube because I was bored, and then it turned out to be really interesting, to connect with.
And I do love that you just jumped in. And I know how that feels, because when I did this, I just jumped in and just thought, well, I'm going to learn this along the way with everybody else. It's a beautiful thing to do, because you would know, as that 5-1, it can be quite daunting to not know it all before jumping in and sort of putting yourself out there due to projection. But I love your videos, and I love watching how they've evolved. I probably haven't seen the older ones. I've only seen the new ones, and they're just, I love your style, and I love how you speak human design, because you're not just rehashing the textbook. You're really taking it to a personal approach, which is really relatable. So thank you for those. If people haven't seen Desiree's videos, I highly recommend you check them out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the one thing when I approached human design, I knew that I wanted to do something that was just like a little bit unique, but also something that caught my eye. So even though I can have like a mechanical mindset and I love systems, it really wasn't the whole mechanics and like the transits and stuff that actually drew me into it. What really drew me into human design and continuing to study it are like some of these concepts, like um, bigger ones, such as like, no choice or no free will. But the basis of like what human design is built upon is, kind of being like this blueprint of this mechanics of not only our design that is connected with our DNA, because, I think that scientific part is definitely interesting as well. But it's also, it just doesn't explain the human design. It explains every single interaction. It explains like all the past and all the future. And I've kind of always been like a really big geek on prophecy. And if somebody says that, they have information in regards to like something that's going to happen in the future, like I follow it. I love predictions. I want to know what people are saying. So the whole thing with like this upcoming mutation of 2027 is also like something that kept me into like human design, because at this time, human design, it takes 7 years for your cells to regenerate, and then because it's about your human design, and then I'd say more deconditioned, but technically you're supposed to be like fully deconditioned. So I'm still in that 7 year mark, but I'm really anxious to see if there really is going to be. I can already see some 5 years, but seeing then the difference in myself. But this like upcoming mutation in 2027, there is this rumor that floats around the human design community that human design is going to kind of shift, or the purpose of how relevant human design may be a little bit different. So there's kind of these rumors that it might kind of close in where human design is just kind of obsolete, and then we're just thrown on our own because we're going to more of like an individualistic type living. And then I'm like, well, I got to get this video out for anybody, like all my reflectors that come out before 2027, because if human design was to go away, I'm like, well, I want to make sure that I'm taking care of like my own, you know what I mean? So that was also kind of like a fueling thing of why I kept it. But yeah, a lot of the things in human design, or why I'm interested in it, is really a lot of it is concepts based, but also the transits. But I follow other types of astrology too, so that kind of wasn't anything of a surprise. But it's really interesting when you dig really deep and what it's actually pointing you to. And I think
Mm,
that that's what I wanted to approach it as,
mm,
because when I first started my YouTube channel, it was more of just kind of like a free for all. This is just what I'm going to do. And then kind of niching down, or just kind of really focusing on some of more of the, what my viewers would want, um, which is the human design. It's just been, I don't know, like it's just really interesting to see, to be able to go a little bit deeper into some of that stuff and to bring it out, to point to what I would say human design is pointing to, which is kind of like a greater sense of awareness, of self-acceptance. You are a unique individual, and love yourself. So those are like really key value points that I try to include in any kind of work that I'm trying to do with social media specifically.
mm.
So
So you're also a qualified counselor, psychologist. So having human design as a part of you personally, has it just amplified it a lot more? Like, do you use both of these modalities together?
yeah, sure, absolutely. So, like already in like the counseling process, I knew that it was, listening to a client and bringing out about a level of awareness in them to help them come to like their own conclusions and realize some of their things. It wasn't necessarily about, you know, giving advice, because it's not about me, what I say. It's your life, it's about what you say. And taking in like understanding the reflector, and understanding that, being in an environment with another person and taking in their their aura, sampling their aura or their definition, and kind of like, those phenomena, the mechanics that are happening. Um, it really does help me see now, like, I would say like a greater sense of awareness. So if somebody's like coming in and they could be like beating around the bush, or it's more of like, I'm not necessarily kind of listening to what they're saying. I'm also, if it's in person, feeling, what kind of could be coming up as well. So using human design definitely, and just understanding, okay, this is what I'm going through. This is kind of like what I'm feeling, and being like, this empath. Um, I can also use that, what I'm feeling, to promote a level of awareness, or to help guide, my client as well. So I think it
Mm,
marries very nicely together. It's
yeah,
definitely a unique process, but it's an effective process. So that's something that, yeah, I feel like it helps.
fantastic. Now, you're also a mummy, a mom, sorry, the
Yeah.
MUM and the MOM, to two
Yeah.
generator boys. And how old are they, may I ask? Like, were you a mum before you found human design, or were you the opposite?
So I have two boys. They are 11 and 13.
Oh,
So I definitely, I had them before um, I stumbled upon human design. But looking back, when I first had my son, like I was in the military, so I was in the Navy, and it was so different. He's a manifesting generator, and soon as like he was born, I'm like, okay, something is different. Like I could feel his aura, I felt his definition. Like constantly being around somebody with like a defined ego center, he has a defined G center, a defined sacral center. I'm like, these were powerful energies that I just could not, like put my finger on. I'm like, what is it like being around my son that's like so different, that like motivates me? Because my youngest is also a generator, so when they're around, I mean, I'm getting the dishes done, I'm cleaning the house, I'm getting everything done on my short list, because I'm picking up that sacral energy. It's wonderful, I love it. As long as I'm not exhausting myself. But it was really interesting, because when he was born, it kind of like threw me into like this. That's when I first really began taking self discovery seriously, just because, not that I was being a mom, but it was like I felt something, but I had no idea what it was,
mm,
and now I kind of have that context. But yeah, it's been really interesting having two generator boys. Most of my family early on were like generators, so I come from like a generator and not self generator family. So that's kind of like some issues because they just kind of label me as weird. So I don't really have anybody like close to me to talk to you about human design and being a reflector. But the thing about the generators and that sacral energy, it's like it's powerful. And I really wish that like every generator would know like what such a gift that is to just have that constantly defined and you know. But then again, of course, they're like so much energy where it's just like settle down,
Yeah.
So
And how does the manifesting generator and the generator get on in that capacity? Do you really notice the manifesting generator energy a lot more than the generator energy?
I do. I do. So that's definitely something that like I've seen before in like some human design forums and groups. They're like, what's the difference between a generator and a manifesting generator? And me as a reflector, I can tell there's a difference. There's definitely a difference between the manifester and the generator. And um, it is my manifesting like generator son. Like, he does have the energy, but he has that energy of like, wanting to manifest, of wanting to be bold, of wanting to be out there, to be, seen. And then, my youngest, my generator son, like he still has that energy, but it's more of like, it's I'm gonna say like more calming, but I'd say it's more of, I don't know if he's just in tune with it, but it's definitely different. It's not as, I would say, intense sometimes,
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely that difference.
Yeah, I have a manifesting ego at manifesting generator son. And he's nearly 5. So it's a whole new ball game for me to be around that
Right.
energy. Um, and I'm
Yeah.
glad, well, in a way, I guess you would be in the same boat. You've kind of knew something was quite different about them, or you could feel that aura, that energy. And then finding human design, did you start looking at ways to parent differently and relating to them differently?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when of course, like whenever I realized like, okay, I'm a reflector, I learned a little bit more about myself, I'm like, okay, well, let me get my son's, my son's chart. And it really, one of the interesting things, like the whole sacral sounds. And I did find myself of like telling them, enunciate, tell me yes or no, instead of, letting them go, or so that is something that like I just stopped doing. And then they speak from their sacral sounds. Um, and then teaching them to to respond, which I know is harder for my manifesting generator son than it is my generator son. He's fine, with like okay, somebody comes to me, then proceed. But with the manifesting generator sign, sometimes I got to say, well, let's take a step back here. Maybe we don't really need to move forward with this. And one of the hugest things that I'm teaching them is trust your initial gut response. I don't second question them. If I ask them something, they say yes, or they don't really say yes or no. But their initial like gut response, that's what I go by. You know what I mean? I'm not like, because for me, like it's completely different. Like I'll think about something over and over and over again before we got to wait a decision. So that's not easy for me to do. But I do promote that in them, to trust their gut response, and to honor their definition as well, because they have defined G centers, and that defines sacral center. And I mean, my youngest, his definition's a little bit more, he's like defined centers, which is interesting because he feels more calm. So I don't know if that could be it, but yeah. So those are it definitely like looking into it, and also their incarnation cross. I do look into that too, and then seeing what kind of definitions are defined in them that they could like draw upon, or see, okay, well, what's going to be like their trajectory of their life, like how much of it I need to take, and part of it to like to effective parently, you know what I mean, just to make sure that I'm not trying to condition them, because of, I don't even know, whatever reason, because of my own conditioning. So I really wanted to, you know, stop that as much as I could without having to be like so like forceful in there. So I'm just kind of mindful of saying, okay, well, like, this is their strategy to do this, and so forth. So I just kind of honor that and teach them that, hey, maybe you should, do X, Y, and Z. So
Yeah, it's fascinating being a parent in human design and honoring their strategy, honoring our own strategy, as well as letting them, or teaching them how to honor your own, and you also learning from them, because it's something that we're not taught at first. Like when we find out we're reflectors, we're very much about us, and we're very much like, okay, and we do look at our family, But I'm still learning, for example, how to teach my son how to inform, because I don't know how to do that. So I find that, these things I've got to learn myself, of going, you need to, like I said to him this morning, because he was like, come on, come on, come on, come on. And I just sort of said to him, I know you like to move really fast, and I'm sorry that I'm in your way, but sometimes you need to slow down for me. And, just teaching him as well that I'm not always going to be able to keep up with him.
Mhm.
I think that's important. I think that there needs to be a line there between that. But he doesn't give me those grunts, because he's got that defined ego center. So I notice he's got that emotional wave. And he'll say things like, yep.
Mhm.
But my niece is a pure generator. And I actually caught myself the other day when you were speaking about conditioning. And she's 2 in a bit, and she gives a lot of grunts, and I know she can speak. And I caught myself saying to her, Riley, can you use your words? And I thought, don't say that, just let her grunt, because you can ask her, do you want this? And
Right.
it's so good because of that sacral. It's
Yeah.
just so good.
Right.
It's like, I know everything, whereas the manifesting generators, it's a little bit harder to get the and
Mhm.
the So yes, I think it is really
Right.
important
Right.
for us to teach each other, or teach reflectors to teach reflector mums, I guess, to learn from our friends of how to,
Mhm.
like, we're providing this service of saying, hey, well, we're reflectors, we can help you with your reflector child, but also, can you help us learn about manifesting generators? And because they are a little bit different, a little bit trickier.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Yeah, I always make sure too that they are exhausted when they go to bed too. Like make sure that they get all of that energy out, whether it's like, okay, we're going to go out to the park, we're going to go outside and play, go run on the treadmill, like do whatever you have to do. So that's also something that, I always am like an advocate for, is to you get your energy out, even if like I don't have it, because I always don't, but I know how important it is for them to just, to move a lot and get all that energy out, especially at the end of the day.
And
So,
before human design, did you intuitively do that anyway? Or were you pretty much like I was, okay, it's bedtime now, off you go, and wondering why it was just constant fight? And now you go, makes
mhm,
sense.
right, exactly. So, no, honestly, like I think growing up, a lot of my conditioning, is like early on in their childhood, like before I even come across human design, I did notice that some of my conditioning, I was using that in parenting. And that was one of them where, me having a military background, I like the structure. I like this, we're doing this at this time, and then it's this time. And, they've always had like a set bedtime anyway. And, and then kind of like this routine that I wanted to get them in because that's what I like. And there was a fight sometimes where they're just like, I'm not tired. And then, sometimes it's like screaming matches. And I'm like, I like, why? Like, I don't understand. And then, looking back, it's like, well, they probably didn't have, enough space to like, go and run. And I think it was something early on that I didn't when they were younger, where I was just like, okay, well, if they're freely playing, that was like enough, or it could be enough. And it really didn't register that, well, maybe they need a little bit more. Maybe they need to, not go to bed at 8 o'clock. They're not tired, according to, human design and their strategy, then you're not really meant to be put to bed. But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, if they go to bed at midnight, they're not going to be able to wake up, and then it's going to throw off the next day. So I was already like thinking ahead. And then, yeah, it was just power struggles and unnecessary fights that thankfully, they don't happen anymore. Like, I can't, that was like when they were younger.
Yeah.
Now, like parenting them, I think with this greater awareness of who they are as generators and me as a
Yeah.
reflector, there's definitely been a lot of just tension that is just kind of eased. I honor their design, and then I can speak to them of saying, mom's just tired today. I don't really like doing this, or give me some time to, think about this before I make a decision. Give me some space so that way, I can digest some of this stuff. And they have been like really, really good with, allowing me to operate according to my design. And
Yeah.
then, I can, give that to them and set up their life to where, they are honoring their own design, even though they technically don't know. I did tell them my manifesting generator son, my oldest son, is like really, really smart. And he's into astrology, like maybe like a little bit. So I told him, I'm like, you're a manifesting generator. This is because he watches some of my videos on YouTube. I tried to pull him into a little bit to see if maybe he'd be interested, but not so much. I think it's just too far out there to where it's just not cool. It's not fun. It's weird. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that if you'd actually started to get them on board, get them into the cult, so to speak. I do use the language a lot around our children, especially the two younger ones. The two older ones, it's completely different. But I do use, because I've got a projector daughter, so I really try, and she's 6, and I feel that this is a really good time for her to hear this language, so she can not get as bitter, and not lash out. But
Yeah.
I just try to use the language as much as I can without overwhelming them with "you are this" or putting them in a box, because I kind of believe I really do love human design, and it's been probably one of the most enlightening things that I've learned so far to date. But I also know that it's just another tool in the toolbox. So I don't try and lump them in and say, just because you are this, you have to do it this way. So it's more about you experiment as you go through, but this is the language I'm going to use. So I hope it sticks somehow. But as you say, who knows?
Right. I know that yeah, when in human design, and I really want, I have seen, I don't want it to be like another a teaching or something that would like where people look at it as like another religion or like another cult, and using it as just kind of like, okay, well, this says this, then this is what it means. Because even though there is some interpretation with like some of the 64 gates, there are other interpretations of the I Ching. And it's not that like say gate one, of you being like creatives going to change, but there could be other systems, so there are that teaches like the I Ching that kind of like expand upon that. So there is room for human design to grow, and
Yep.
I would, I mean, I'm in it for, I would say, as well, who knows when, right? I don't know, maybe a planet shifts or something like that. But as far as like now, I really don't want somebody to like get into human design and then like stay stuck in it. It's like you can broad out and use other different tools or whatever is like aligned to you. Like me, I stopped following transits completely in design. First, like in the beginning when I did it, it was like driving me crazy because I had the opportunity every like summer, my children go with their father. So I have a couple months of where it's just kind of like free time for me. I'm not married or anything, and I don't have any much more responsibilities outside of work. So um, when I first stumbled upon human design, I was like, okay, I'm going to track the moon. And I remember I did it for a whole month, and I didn't, just to kind of see what my cycle was. I really wanted to see what that was. And I, I remember the days I would sit there, I would go into Jovian Archive just now and I would watch, and I would wait for that moon to change lines to see if it really was like that subtle, if I noticed any kind of difference. And then after a while, I just realized that I was going crazy. Like I was just driving myself mad trying to find and track this moon consistently. So now I use Vedic system, which is following the moon during like 27 different positions rather than 64 plus the 6 lines, because
Yep.
it was crazy. I was
Yeah.
going mad, but there was some interesting and enlightening things. You know what I mean? To that I know it's like within myself of the shifting energies, but consistently tracking it, like it was like I have to broaden out. Like I cannot only just focus on human design if I wanted to necessarily grow. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. And that's come out so much in just talking with fellow reflectors, being in your group, being in other groups. It's the first thing generally that comes out. How do I track the moon? I'm supposed to watch the moon. And what am I? I'm a reflector. Am I reflecting all this stuff? And I think when people first find out they're reflectors, they really just think, oh, they're telling me I'm a mirror. So is anything me, or am I just all reflecting everything? And I remember being that person of thinking, oh, where does that mean I'm not anything? But yeah, I agree with what you're saying about tracking. My first month when I tracked, I had my little chart and I was watching it all go through. So I knew that, if this was at 2 a.m. or this was at 5 a.m. and I'd think, do I feel anything? Like I drop into that meditative state. And then on the second month, I decided to do it differently. I decided just to journal how I was feeling when I'd feel like a bit aggressive or when I'd feel a little bit sad or something. And I'd just write it down. And then I went back by the end of that 28 days and I looked what had happened. And I started to see a little bit of a trend. And that was with the planetary transits. So now I know when I go, but I've then tried to experiment again. Hello, line one, look at me, nerd, with using energies in advance. So if I see that something's coming up and I know that I can probably pull from it, I go, right, that might be a really good day for me. And I'm still experimenting with that right now. I can't really see anything. There's nothing groundbreaking there, but I kind of hoped there might have been, but I haven't found anything really yet that just says, oh, on this day, all of this is going to be in a line. And that's a day maybe I can just go bang and get a whole heap of stuff done. Hasn't worked yet. Still getting there.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's sometimes when I'm noticing where I just like have a lot of energy that day, or I know that I'm not having coffee, like I'm not relying on energy drinks or anything like that to get stuff done. But if I feel like that will being defined based upon the transits, sometimes I do push myself. I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, well, you know what, I'm not gonna have this energy tomorrow. I'm not gonna have this in a couple of days from now. Let me plan out what I can do and then, use it while I have it, because I know it's not always gonna be there. And it's something that is unfortunate, like if you're like stumbling upon it at first, because it's not something that you really want to hear. It's really hard to organize your life around the moon, or your cycle. So it definitely was disheartening at first, but after like following my strategy, like you said, and monitoring it after it already happened, like looking back at it and saying, okay, well, I know that certain things are going to come up like every single month. Like I know I'm not always studying human design, but I know that when it does pop, like, I know in my cycle, I'm going to be digging deeper into it and trying to understand it more. Or sometimes I want to write, or sometimes I want to do this, and sometimes I want to do that. So as I'm learning more and like, practicing with my strategy and understanding myself, it is easier to, mold my life, move my schedule, move my work schedule, around, my
Yeah.
cycle. So, and reflectors watching this, it is possible. I know it seems like disheartening at first, like, how am I going to do this? I got to work, I got to do this, I got to do that. But it's kind of interesting how it just naturally, unfolds, just simply based upon, the awareness of yourself and knowing that the transits are temporary. What you're feeling is temporary. And, every day is a new day. So,
Yeah. I love that. And just getting back to what you were saying there before about being in the Navy, and look, I'm sure there's plenty of other reflectors that have been in the forces as well. But how was that for you? Did you struggle being that having to be that regimented and that disciplined and go go go? Like, do you feel that? Did you get burnt out at all by having that lifestyle?
yes, and no. I mean, yes, I did. Like, definitely, yes. Like, there's just, I think, no matter what your type is, no matter what your
Mm,
definition is, they're going to push you to the point of where you're exhausted. Like, that's just what you do in the military.
mm,
And this was back in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I did do some tours like overseas, and it was different that, I joined when I was like 21, like 37 now. So there was some excitement already. I love to travel. I love connecting with people from different cultures and, just different walks of life. So that was kind of like fuel. It was very exciting. And the quarters were so close that it was never where I didn't have any kind of like alone time. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I was always in somebody else's aura. And I honestly think that even though that was conditioning me, it really did carry me through a lot, because it was kind of like where I could disappear, but everybody else is kind of like doing the same thing. And it was nice to kind of have this place. So I didn't really have to focus so much on myself. I just had to focus on where I needed to be, what I needed to do, and get my tasks done for, you know, um, it was. I mean, I personally, I enjoyed it. I loved it. It's what, supports my lifestyle now. I wasn't able to, well, I mean, I like to continue career wise, I'm medically retired now, but it's definitely something that I feel karmically tied to, of like my own country, of like, fighting for the country, like fighting for a war or something like that. It was definitely an
mm.
experience that I don't take for granted. So yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I was just curious as to how that kind of must have felt, I suppose, to sort of be, but as you say, it
Yeah.
motivated you to keep going.
Yeah, it was really like, like I said, I mean, I was young, I was already conditioned anyway, and I wanted to just travel the world. And, I got to meet a lot of interesting people,
Yeah.
but it was really, back on it now, a lot of my motivations and like what I did was just from the definition of other people and the conditioning. So it's like, it was easy, I would say, in a sense, to where, I could just kind of surrender to it and then do what I needed to do. But if I were in it now, I wouldn't. It would be like completely different because there's no way I would want to be, constantly sleeping in somebody else's aura and picking up on all their stuff and, that type of thing. But yeah, it's interesting.
So you are very seasoned when it comes to welcoming new reflectors into the fold. Thank you for that. And you do provide a lot of resources for new reflectors. Thank you for that. But what are just some of the simple tips and tricks that you could give a new reflector first finding out? I found out I'm a reflector. What's the first piece of advice you could give to them?
Yeah. So the first advice I would give to any reflector that found out there was a reflector is to just breathe, and that it's a process, right? It's a process. It's overwhelming, and within time, and just understanding that you are a reflector is pretty much like a big deal anyway. Because even if we're looking at human design, and a lot of reflectors really don't have that opportunity. They don't really have that privilege to understand that they are a reflector, whether you're dealing with your strategy or you're experimenting with your strategy, or not. Just knowing that you're a reflector is enough right now. And I would say that to just, like I said, breathe, but also, understand that it is a process, but it will get better like over time. It is going to be overwhelming at first, like it just naturally is, because until you're able to get really a grip on like your cycle and understand these shifting energies, then things in your life, it will just naturally play out better, because then you're not chasing a temporary definition. Because if you're chasing a temporary definition, then you're going to realize that that's not going to come to fruition, that's not going to manifest, or that's not even going to sustain itself, because it was built upon something that was temporary. And like, and I would tell new reflectors to, honor, to slow down, definitely slow down. Don't feel
Mm.
like you have to do all of these different things. Don't have all these projects like this and this and this and that, because, one, you're going to burn yourself out, and you just can't. I don't think anybody can, regardless of your definition, but it's so much easier for a reflector to feel that definition of spark, like, oh my God, this is a really great idea. I want to go and do it. And then, it's gone. So,
That's right. There's the
you know,
motivation. Well,
yeah, right, exactly. So I think there's that. And then also just some hope, because there is hope. Having experiment with human design, knowing human design, and even though I feel like I'm still a newbie at it and only being like 5 years in, I can tell you that I started to see results in my life in the first year. I was able to focus, like I said, on myself, and then the opportunities for work came to me, because that's a big thing with reflectors too. Like, we're wide open, so everything, is going to come to us. And that's like really, really hard when we're like, well, I need money, I need this, I need that. And it's just natural in culture to just go out and, and grab these things. But I mean, it's really interesting how it plays out, that things do come to you, the things that you do need, and, work opportunities,
yeah,
or, different ideas on ways to mold your schedule around, something that works for you.
yeah.
So definitely,
It does take
I
time.
think it's a
Thank you
big
for that.
deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a big deal. And one last question I've got for you. You found out you're a reflector and you're a mum. What is
Yeah.
your best tips and tricks to deal with that?
Yeah. So I would say the best tips and tricks, for me personally, if you can, experiment with sleeping alone. Try not to sleep in your child's aura, or even, your spouse, your mate, whoever you're with, in their aura as well. Really experiment with sleeping alone, because that's going to be really, really big, especially if you're in the deconditioning process, which is 7 years. So it definitely does. When you're able to get good quality sleep, you're able to, it definitely affects your awareness. So that is definitely something I would recommend. And also focus on yourself as well. Make sure you are getting that alone time. And if you can be in nature, that's great. Reflectors love nature. I haven't met a reflector that doesn't enjoy a natural landscape over, something man-made. So that is, in human design, that is something that grounds us. So I would say, go out into nature or a natural landscape, and really kind of connect with natural beauty. That's going to be something that's really big as well. And if you're a reflector and you're a parent, recently, a couple weeks ago, I seen something on Facebook of just how much of a blessing it is to have one, like a reflector, but a reflector that knows they're a reflector, actually in your family, and able to reflect back to specifically, like generators and, other types as well. But in that process, it really is doing so much more and raising conscious kids than what we actually like are aware of. Like I know that me just knowing that I am a reflector is enough to increase the awareness of my kids. You know what I mean? Like it plays out that way. This is what is written in human design. It's what I read. So, you know, it really is like a treasure, to have a reflector parent from, like I said, what I recently read and being able to reflect that back. So, um, I think that that's also just, something that's absolutely wonderful. And yeah, learn about your children's design and then, help them to follow their strategy because by the time that they're adults, raising conscious kids or just kids that are just more naturally aware, you're already setting them up for success.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Thank you. That is so, so
yeah.
true. Desiree, how can we find you? Tell us about what you're doing. What are you doing with the Inspired Human?
Yeah. So it's I changed it to you can always find me inspiredhumandesign.com. That's kind of where I do all of my works on like human design, or if I'm just writing something about it because I love to write, that's where I would put it in inspiredhumandesign.com. You can also find me on YouTube, Inspired Human or Inspired Human Design. I'm not sure about the name yet. It goes back and forth. And then, of course, there is the Inspiring Reflectors Facebook group, which is really, just an interesting, I'd say just in there for me, but for all the other reflectors too. There's like other reflectors that are not only sharing their life story, but they're sharing their resources as well. So it's like a one-stop shop. If you just find out you're a reflector, it's Inspiring Reflectors Facebook group because you're going to get the information that you need, going to get a really awesome. So nothing is like too weird. So if you're feeling like, some anxiety or not really sure how to navigate, just finding out your reflector. I would recommend the Inspiring Reflectors Facebook group. It wasn't actually my idea. It was my audience and my followers' idea to create it. So yeah, I did. It's always been everything that I do for reflectors has been audience driven. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
been them that's been fueling, wanting to have more resources or wanting to understand something. So that's that.
Well,
So inspiredhumandesign.com.
thank you. Just
Yeah,
can I just say thank you so very much for doing the work that you've done over the last 4 to 5 years and for helping us because it's been invaluable. I think everybody who helps each other like this, it's just invaluable and we do it out of love because
sure.
we've been there and we know how it feels. So again, thank you. And I'm sure everybody
Right.
else thanks you as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
And did you want to talk about any of the offerings that you're doing in 2022?
Yeah, so in 2022, I know a lot of people have been asking, like, when am I going to? I did do readings before. I'm going to be opening that up. Readings, or it may be more of kind of like a consultation because I don't want to strictly just do human design. I kind of want to open up for intuitive readings as well, and then also bringing in a little bit more of my professional background, which I think would be of value. So, inspiredhumandesign.com and 2022, I will be opening up the consultations and the readings again. And yeah, you can always find me there.
Thank you so very much. And thank you so very much for your time today. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah, absolutely. Anytime. This was fun.
And we'll talk to
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Okay, bye bye.